USN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. What's going on in the world now, whether you believe it or not, and you certainly wouldn't, reading the mainstream media is having an effect and will have a profound effect on every person in the country and the world, especially on your wealth and on your choices in the future. And that's why you need to be listening to alternative voices in the financial area, whether it's Jim Sinclair, whether it's David Stockman or Martin Armstrong or Jerry Robinson of FTM Daily, who is with us now. Jerry, welcome back to the show.
It's great to be here, Kerry. Thank you.
Hey, so we got the Middle East blowing up in more ways than we can imagine, and now the U.S. is launching airstrikes. And I think the press conference last night that the president held, and I never ever watch a press conference put on by any politician. I just happened to catch a few minutes of that one because my son was watching it, and it was like, we're already doing the airstrikes, and he failed to mention that altogether. And what's your take on this, Jerry?
Well, I think that you're definitely right in the fact that we already have been engaged in this. If you Google airstrikes on Iraq by the United States or airstrikes on ISIS by the United States, you'll find numerous videos. And they're dated from June and July. So we have a history now of doing this. What's interesting, I think, about the whole thing is that the U.S. has really kind of been caught by surprise by ISIS. At least that's the way that it all appears. Now, of course, we don't have the macro view that the guys at the very top have. We don't know exactly what they're thinking, why they have chosen the things that they have chosen here in Washington, or what that's all about. But what we do know is that ISIS is just had a recent string of military victories. They are provoking the military wrath now of the United States publicly. Up to this point, it's been pretty covert kind of action. Now it's overt. And what's really unfortunate about ISIS is that it has been so instrumental in destroying the fragile U.S.-imposed order that pretty much bound Iraq together after the Iraq War. And this has been a real point of embarrassment for the United States. I mean, Iraq was already descending into chaos after we left. It was a problem ever since we went over there. And now you have this ragtag group that has U.S. weapons running through the streets of Iraq, terrorizing the population. And the United States has been somewhat mute on this whole topic. They went over and took out the strongman Saddam back in 2003. His crime, of course, was trying to use something besides the U.S. dollar. I'm sorry. His crime was weapons of mass destruction, I think. Wasn't that the case? It was something about weapons of mass destruction.
I heard something about that, yeah.
And so Saddam Hussein, who was a strongman who kept the country in order, no doubt a rogue dictator and a thug, but at the same time, Christians were able to, walk around without being beheaded very often in that country during his tenure. The U.S. comes in, blows that whole strongman out of the water, and then allows and creates this vacuum for groups like ISIS to come in. And not only do these groups come in, they come in with U.S. weapons because we're arming them. So now the United States is saying, well, let's arm the Kurds. Or now the United States is saying, well, we really need to give more arms to, Malaki's government down in Baghdad. So really all the U.S. does is just this vicious circle, Kerry. They just keep giving more weapons and more weapons. The military-industrial complex likes this. They like the outbreak of violence. They like seeing people crucified and heads cut off. They like this. It's good for stock prices. What it does is it drives up the demand. You see, there's a lot of weapons that have been created by the military-industrial complex, just like a box of cereal. If it sits on the shelf too long, you got to toss it. And the same thing with these bombs. These bombs are attached to stock prices. People buy companies that create bombs, and they expect there to be normal supply and demand. And so right now we have a demand for 500-pound bombs to be dropped over in Iraq. And this is really good for stock prices for these companies. And so this is really where we've come. This is the full-blown, full-frontal assault of capitalism gone amok, where you actually have people rooting as bombs fall from the air because it means that we're going to have a better quarter this quarter. These bombs have to be used. And that's why you see people like John McCain, the senator. You see people like Senator Lindsey Graham, who are blue in the face, begging Obama to drop bombs, please, because you take a look at their contributors, their political contributors, and many of them are these companies that want these bombs dropped because they can't make more if they still have some. That's why they're willing to sell them to anybody who will take them. Anybody who's breathing, they'll sell the bombs to.
Yeah, I think they call this the warfare welfare state, right?
Ron Paul has hit that so much. Yeah, that's exactly what we're seeing, Kerry.
Yeah, well, and it doesn't matter who wins or loses, just clear out the inventory, right?
Yeah, you got to make room for the new. You know, there's a whole new 2015 model of weapon that's coming out, and we've got to make room for them. So let's get rid of these 2014 old models.
It's kind of like the auto industry, right?
Yeah, kind of, sort of.
Except you don't trade it in. You just blow up the old stuff and then put in your order for the new stuff.
Well, and we're making light, of some of this, but to be honest with you, the human toll that has been exacted from this effort in Iraq by ISIS has been absolutely demoralizing, not only to Iraq, but it's been demoralizing to the Christian community living in that area. They're pretty much gone. We've seen headline after headline of ISIS takes over the largest Christian city in Iraq. They have taken over the largest dam in Iraq up in Mosul. In the meantime, you have the ISIS folks telling the Christian community they got a choice, quote unquote. They can leave, convert to Islam, or be killed. And all during this time, you have the Maliki government in Baghdad that is weak-fisted. He's unpopular amongst the Sunni population, and he cannot keep his thumb on the country the way Saddam Hussein did. So if I'm George W. Bush and I'm looking at what's happening in Iraq, I have to be having second thoughts. And I'll tell you this, if I'm a parent of someone who lost a son or a precious daughter in the Iraq war, I'm really, really hurting today.
Yeah. Anybody who spent any time, anybody who was there, Jerry made a sacrifice to be there. Even if they got out unscathed, they spent part of their life there, and makes you wonder what the heck you were doing there, right?
Well, yeah. And of course, we do know the reasons why the U.S. goes to war. We see the same thing with Russia. The United States is really picking a fight with Russia right now. And of course, they've demonized them in the media. Meanwhile, Russia is doing the exact same thing in its media. It's demonizing the United States, which leads us to believe that we are on the cusp of another very major world war. I mean, this feels a lot like the pre-war days of World War I. It's similar to what we saw in World War II. You had Hirohito over in Japan, and of course you had Hitler in Germany, and they were taking wide swaths of territory. And that's really what we have here with ISIS. They're threatening to do this. You have the same thing, the territorial claims with Russia. So we have a lot of concerning fires all around the world geopolitically. And the stock market is hesitating here. The stock market is trying to go higher. The trend is no doubt up and intact, but it's having a hard time. And gold, which normally you would think, Kerry, when you have crazy thugs running through the streets of Iraq with knives and weapons and U.S. military gear, and then you have Russia and the United States in a Cold War threatening even potentially a hot war, and you have all the other issues we have now, you would think that gold will be jumping on this. And once again, we're seeing the suppression of gold for whatever reason that the elites want it. But here's the thing. We just issued a buy signal to all of our subscribers this morning on gold at $13.15. We think that this is a nice short-term buying opportunity. We don't think it'll last very long. We issued one of these at early June.
I remember. I talked to you right after it.
Yeah, we issued it at about $12.60, and then the price of gold went up to about $13.30, and then we had a sell signal. We have a new buy signal developing right now. It's a near-term buy signal, so we're not going to buy and hold for a long time with this. We're going to buy and take advantage of the brief pop. We think we'll see a good $13.50, $13.60 before it's over.
I wouldn't be surprised at all. I mean, you look last week, beginning of this week, gold went below 1,300, which has become like the new floor. Couple of days, I think it went down. What was the low? 1278 intraday, but that was such a short period of time. It shot right back up, and now it's back over 1,300. If I look at Kitco real quick, give me a second. So Kitco is showing gold down almost $4 for the day at 1310, but you can't really look at intraday swings anymore because they've become meaningless. So, it's still well above 1,300. You could anytime, my point is anytime it's going under 1,300, man, it's becoming shorter and shorter. And you're seeing higher lows effectively is my point. So anyway, when we return, I want to talk about the junk bond selling frenzy on Wall Street, what you see about that, and precious metals as well, and Bitcoin, because you've got something you're going to be talking about with that shortly. When we return with Jerry Robinson on the Financial Survival Network.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Do you have Medicare or health insurance through your employer? If so, listen up. The healthcare reform wasn't written to save the healthcare industry or even to lower healthcare costs. Shoot, it isn't even designed to insure the uninsured. It's just a temporary political byproduct. Like a flat rock you step on in a swiftly moving stream, Obamacare is just a means to an end. Want to learn more about Obama's ultimate objective? Then you'll want to review our latest research presentation found on oclies.com. In it, a health expert and industry insider explains what you think you know about caring for your health is about to drastically change in 2014. Plus, he details the simple steps you could take to save thousands of dollars per year in health costs. It's free for you to preview at oclies.com. Don't waste time. What you don't know about the healthcare reform could hurt you and your family.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
We're back. We're talking with Jerry Robinson. So, Jerry, I don't know if you've been following this rout that took place on junk bonds, but they're also known as high-yield bonds, and they were selling at such a small differential from investment-grade bonds that this was just a major red flag that market oversold and I should say overbought, and that the stock market's going to come down. And now the headline is investors pull a record $7.1 billion from junk bond funds. Individual investors should never touch high yield bonds, correct?
Well, I think if you're going to say never on something, I think that's probably pretty appropriate. I mean, that's something that most people have no business investing in unless they fully know what they are.
And maybe I think myself, I probably wouldn't touch them unless you're talking high double-digit returns after a crash has taken place, and you really can pick out these gems that something like the guys from Drexel Burnham did after the junk bond market crashed in the 80s, where they really had the knowledge to pick them out. But your average investor just doesn't have the skill and the knowledge, and they're usually going to hop in that market at exactly the wrong time looking for yield. Right?
Unfortunately, you're right. Yeah, exactly. I stay away from the junk bonds. There's enough to do with many of the other assets that we track that junk bonds just don't really come on our radar that often.
Yeah, and when you see, because people are you're so yield starved now because of financial repression, say, oh, junk bonds, well, they're safe. The defaults have been so low. Well, you know what? Defaults on auto loans have been low, on the subprime auto loans. And you know what's going to happen there, Jerry. This has all been done before.
Yeah,
So,
nothing new under the sun.
right?
Well, with the market overall, the S&P 500 is what we pay attention to. A lot of folks look at the Dow. You can look at the Nasdaq. You can look at the Russell. You can look at the Wilshire. But we really focus on the S&P 500. It's the big gauge, I think, globally for most international investors. And the S&P 500, as everybody knows, has been in this massive uptrend.
Sure.
Really ever since 2009 when we hit the bottom, with some pullbacks, obviously. But QE1, QE2, QE3 keeps goosing this market higher. And if you look at a chart of the S&P 500, we're sitting right around the 1920, 1925 level somewhere right now. That's really the very first break of a major trend line. The really major trend line was sitting at about 1932. This was a solid support level for the market. The next level down that we're watching, Kerry, is 1875. If the S&P 500 crosses below 1875, that will break the one-year uptrend on the S&P. And if you would simply use trend lines, in fact, I was talking to some people about this today, that back in 1929, many people think about the market crash and they get very concerned about being involved in the market whenever we have a really big black swan or we have a big market crash or whatever the case might be. And, really the way to avoid these things is to pay attention to the trend line. Once the trend line breaks, you really have no insurance anymore. So right now, I'm still long the market, albeit with a very strong sense of caution, because we are still above the trend line, but we've broken one of the major ones. So if we break below 1875 sometime within the next few weeks, I'm going to be taking my this is personally what I'm doing. I'm going to take my tax-deferred accounts like my IRA or my 401k, things where I don't take a tax hit for selling, and I'm just going to lock in my gains. And I'm not going to be greedy. If we break that trend line, I'm out. Now, on my taxable accounts, like my brokerage accounts or things that aren't, that don't receive tax benefits or advantages, that's something you would want to talk to a CPA about. But for your IRA and for your 401k, that tax-deferred money, there's no taxable event. If there's no taxable event for you, but why in the world would you hold through a massive downturn? And this is one of the things I want to tell you, Kerry. This is one of the things that greatly concerns me about the financial media today. And you, with a microphone, can help people with this because I'm concerned. Remember what happened in 2000? The bubble crashed.
Sure.
And people sold at the bottom, just like they normally do.
Mm-hmm.
Then in 2008, the market crashed, and people sold when? Right at the very end of 2000.
Sure.
Yeah, right at the bottom. You see the majority of volume occurs right there at the very end.
Oh, yeah.
And what I'm afraid of is that people, when they see this next market downturn, you'll obviously have the people who sell, but many people will be convinced that this market will revive and come back, just like it did in 2000, just like it did in 2008.
And they'll be buying,
and they'll be holding. They'll be holding through the downturn because they'll say, well, I was foolish in 2000 and I sold at the bottom, and then I was foolish in 2008 and I sold at the bottom. So this time, I'm just going to hold through this downturn. Well, let me tell you, this downturn, Kerry, is going to be severe, and I'll even go this far to say that I don't know if we can get back to these current levels on the market without massive intervention, because everything we had up to this point was artificial. So how do you come back to these levels without massive intervention? And can our economy handle more intervention from the Fed? So I would tell folks out there who are watching these markets, who have a lot of money or have some money in the stock market, be cautious for that reasoning. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of experts coming out and saying, "Oh, just hold through this. Don't be a fool and sell." And I would say that's really bad advice.
Yeah.
Really bad.
Yeah. Well, look how long it took to recapture your gains from 1929, right?
If you bought at the peak in 1929, at the very peak, you would have broken even finally in 1955 if you bought the Dow. If you bought the S&P, or if you bought some of those stocks there, you would be about 1951. So you had a very long time to and you know what? That was without the Fed goosing the market the way that they have. The levels we've reached now are completely artificial. I don't know how we get back here. I don't know how we get back. Once we crash, I don't know how we get back here.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be a long, long time, and if ever. And because, like you say, this has all been smoke and mirrors, and, it's just a result of money printing, fake money.
It's certainly not the retail investor, because the overall volume on the markets has been, very low. Ever since the crash, we really have just had declining volume, evaporating volume. And so, it's not the retail investor who's driving up these markets. It's the Fed. Mm-hmm. And they're bidding it up, and the big institutional investors are following along and raking in the dough. But we're starting to see some real unusual volume coming on certain stocks, not across the board. We're not seeing real strong volume on the indexes, selling volume, but we are seeing selective. It's almost as if these hedge funds and these institutional investors are taking a look and cherry picking some of their positions and just dumping them. I mean, I'm talking real high volume on some really important stocks, indicating that some of the big boys are getting out.
Distribution's taking place, right?
It is selectively right now.
Selective distribution. That's what you really have to be aware of. And when it starts happening, if you're there, if you don't get out, you're going to get crushed, because the smart money knows exactly when to get out. And that's usually, and then you see the retail money going back in, Jerry, right?
Yeah.
The retail's going into the market, usually at the worst possible time. And that's a foregone conclusion. But you've got software that figures all this out for you, right?
Yeah, I've been trading for about 17 years. I'm an economist and a trader, and then an author. And we have a radio show and all that over at ftmdaily.com. But we created a software finally for traders and long-term investors even who want to identify buy and sell signals based upon our trading philosophy. It called the 2008 crisis. It kept us out of the crash. You can even see it right there in the software. You can see where it gave you a sell signal to get out before the 2008 crash. It gave you a buy signal just a few months after the lows in 2009. It's not a perfect system. I mean, there's no such thing as a holy grail, but it certainly gives you high probability trading ideas, and that's really what it's about. And we're working on a new one. We don't have a time frame yet on when it's going to be out, but we're working on one because we've received a lot of demand for cryptocurrency trading ideas. And so we're going to take our same system that we've used for years to identify buy and sell signals on all financial assets, and we're going to apply it to cryptocurrencies. So, hey, maybe I want to buy Bitcoin, but when should I buy it? When's a good time to buy it? So we're going to have a software that will provide you the high probability time frames to get into Bitcoin, Litecoin, any of the cryptocurrencies. There's all kinds of great API data sources out there. So we're going to pull in a lot of great data, and we'll create that product. It should be pretty cheap. It'll be available at our website, ftmdaily.com, in a few months.
Yeah, well, that one's exciting. I'm definitely going to keep my eyes open for that, because I told you I'm the first one to say it. Maybe not the first one, but I'm the first one to say it exactly this. Bitcoin, the new reserve currency, because once whatever is going to happen to the dollar and all fiat currencies, Jerry, no one's going to ever trust them again. I mean, they're just not. It's going to hit everybody. Talk about de-dollarization by the Russians, the Chinese. It can't happen fast enough. And the very act of de-dollarizing is going to make the collapse that much worse, in my opinion, Jerry. It's going to lead to all sorts of unintended consequences. That's because in a credit bust, depression, whatever you want to call it, what you need most is what you have least of, and that's stability and the undermining of the existing institutions in the world. And we're doing it ourselves, don't get me wrong, but we're enlisting our adversaries to help us do it. Undermining stability of the dollar and the economic system is only going to lead to chaos. So there is no alternative for it, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's hard to argue. Although we are still seeing global central banks boosting their gold reserves. I mean, even the latest IMF report we saw come out showed that it's another big year for central bank gold purchases. I
know, But if a bank comes out, a central bank, and says we're 20% backed by gold, our currency, no one's going to believe them. The central banks are going to lack credibility once this thing hits. So even if you say you have 50%, well, go prove it. And I know central banks are not exactly models of transparency, no matter who the central bank is, right?
Very true. I think that's my problem with Bitcoin, is that they talk about transparency, and I certainly own Bitcoin. I'm not saying that it's or in cryptocurrencies in general. I'm a fan of the concept. I certainly am. Again, I think I pointed this out before, Kerry, but my concern is who controls it. And the obvious answer is, oh no, it's decentralized. Nobody controls it. Okay, well, if I lose some Bitcoin, who stole it? Oh, we can't tell it. We can't tell you who stole it. What do you mean you can't tell? Well, it's really hard. We can't really. Well, that sure is a nice wealth confiscation tool for the banksters. If you can develop something that nobody knows who took it from you, well, that sounds like
there are problems with it.
That sounds like a scam, So, but at the same time, I'm still owning. I'm not going to put my life savings in it, Kerry, but I'm going to own some.
Yeah, I think so, and I think there's pluses to everything. So, on that note, Jerry, we got to go. So, ftmdaily.com. Go there, sign up for Jerry's newsletter. I get it daily. It's great concepts there that you need to be aware of, and go to Financial Survival Network.com and sign up for our free newsletter. And we will talk to you soon, Jerry. Be well.
Okay, Kerry. Thank you.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.